This week in Billionaires, Hyatt Hotels chairman and billionaire Thomas Pritzker is stepping down after Department of Justice files linked him to disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. The hotel heir, who led the company for nearly a decade, announced his retirement after the documents revealed a long-standing friendship with Epstein. Pritzker publicly expressed remorse for his association with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, though he admitted the controversy in his official resignation letter. Scrutiny intensified due to his appearance in flight logs, Epstein's contact book, and past, strongly rejected accusations by Virginia Giuffre. Although never charged with a crime, the scandal forces the departure of one of the family's most prominent figures. Anthropic, the AI company behind Claude, has raised $30 billion, doubling its valuation to $380 billion, and boosting the worth of its 7 billionaire co-founders, including CEO Dario Amodei. Despite public criticism from rivals like Sam Altman and Elon Musk, Anthropic dominates the corporate market with advanced coding tools, generating $14 billion in annualized revenue. The release of its powerful new models briefly led to a sell-off in global software stocks. Anthropic's co-founders are also pledging 80% of their fortunes, nearly $40 billion, to philanthropic causes, setting them apart from their competitors. One of the worst crypto slumps in years has shaved more than $60 billion from the net worths of the world's crypto billionaires. Bitcoin has fallen to about $67,000 down from a record $126,000 just last October. And the entire cryptocurrency market has lost $2 trillion in value over the same time period. The rout has also meant that 10 former billionaires have fallen out of the Three Comma Club entirely. The biggest loser so far has been Binance founder and former CEO Changpeng Zhao, who's lost more than $29 billion as the value of his BNB tokens has plummeted. Welcome to Beyond the Billions. I'm Giacomo Giannini at Forbes, and joining me today is Forbes Deputy Editor Matt Dureau, who's been covering billionaires at Forbes for more than 5 years. Matt, welcome back for, I think, the third time. I see you've got your trusty laptop out again.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me again, Giacomo.
How many lists are you working on these days?
There's a bunch. We just, wrapped up our top givers list, as we'll be chatting about, I think. And we've got our big world's billionaires list coming up in next couple of months, and so we're working on that as we speak.
Yeah. Well, so let's focus on that top givers list, right? So every year we do a list of the 25 biggest philanthropists in the U.S., and we do it every year. So break down the top line numbers for us this year, obviously based on 2025 giving numbers, right? But how, who's at the top? How does it compare to last year? What's changed?
Sure. So when we talk about lifetime giving, we're measuring it as, dollars that have actually reached their final charitable recipients. So that's excluding you'll oftentimes see these big pledges that are paid out over, many years, or amounts that are just sitting in, billionaires' charitable foundations.
Yeah, so it's not donations to a foundation, it's actually from the foundation out towards other places.
Exactly.
People, right? Yeah.
So, speak of my trusty laptop, it's not so trusty. Just went to sleep on me. Yeah. Out the door giving. And so the top 25 most generous philanthropists on our list have given during their lifetimes more than $270 billion, which is up, pretty significantly from last year when the same group, interestingly, no one dropped out, no newcomers. Mm-hmm. But a year ago, that number was only about $240 billion. So, sizable increase in giving across the board for these 25. But at the same time, this group became a lot more wealthy in spite of that giving. So they're worth $1.7 trillion combined, up from about $1.6 trillion combined last year. So as a whole, they've given about 15% or so of their wealth away, which is about the same as last year. So they've done a lot of giving, but they keep getting richer in spite of that.
And, once again, Warren Buffett is at the top. He recently, or beginning of the year, retired from Berkshire Hathaway. What sort of stood out to you, from his year of giving, and how did he sort of change his philanthropy?
Sure.
In 2025?
Yep. So Buffett gave away around $6 billion last year, which was up from about $5 billion the year prior. And sort of like the year prior, about $1.6 billion of that went through, foundations that he and his 3 kids have set up, as well as one foundation in the name of his late first wife. And then the rest of his $6 billion or so of giving over the last year went through the Gates Foundation.
Right.
So Bill Gates' foundation, and which he started and ran, up until the last couple of years with his ex-wife Melinda French Gates. So that's sort of been the giving trend for Buffett over the years. He's given more than $68 billion away to date, making him the most generous philanthropist in America. And the bulk of that giving has gone through the Gates Foundation. And it was expected that when he died, he would leave most or all of his Berkshire Hathaway stock to the Gates Foundation. But he sort of surprised, a lot of people in the philanthropy world a couple of years ago when he announced that would not happen, and that instead, the remainder of his wealth would end up in a charitable foundation run by his kids. So we'll likely see a shift in, that family's giving, going forward as, that sort of kicks in.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to watch sort of how that philanthropy shifts, basically how his kids sort of think about their philanthropy and what to do with that money compared to what Bill Gates was doing, right? Yeah. And to that point, Bill Gates and Melinda French Gates, who obviously were giving together for many years, and we still list together just because they're, it's only been the last couple of years that they've separated. There's also been some big changes with them, right, in 2025. So walk us through how their philanthropy looked like, how that's shifting, and then the big announcement that Bill Gates made about his foundation last year.
Yeah, for sure. So, together, as you mentioned, Bill and Melinda have given away, more than $52 billion in their lifetimes, second only to Buffett. And, over time, almost all of that has come from, or been, through their Gates Foundation, which they ran together until 2024. And then in 2024, Melinda announced that she would be, stepping down as co-chair of the Gates Foundation and leaving to kind of go do her own thing. So she set up this new foundation or group of foundations called Pivotal Philanthropies. And as a part of the agreement that was made when she left the Gates Foundation, Bill agreed to give her $12.5 billion for her own philanthropy. And so a big chunk of that we saw go to Pivotal in 2024, which is the year of its most recent tax returns. So about $9 billion at least has gone to Pivotal.
And we don't have the 25 ones yet.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
So far. And so again, the most recent information for that foundation is, a year or so out of date, but through 2024, that foundation has given away around $500 million. Whereas the Gates Foundation was more broadly focused on, health, primarily across the globe. Melinda's Pivotal Philanthropies is more specifically focused on, women and families. So that's sort of been where most of that $500 million has gone. And so I would imagine that, over time, like with Buffett, we're going to see a shift where, probably more and more of the couple's combined giving total is going to come from Pivotal. And then you mentioned the announcement that the Bill Gates made. So I think it was May of last year, he announced that the Gates Foundation would be shutting down in 2045. So within the next 20 years or so, they're going to, spend down, the remaining assets of the foundation, as well as most of Bill's wealth that is not yet in the foundation.
I imagine he'll keep giving to it, right, and then they'll spend down.
Yeah, money. So you can expect to see likely a big acceleration from that foundation's giving as well going forward.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, right, but one of the people who gave the most in 2025 was MacKenzie Scott, right? She also has not pioneered, but sort of is also interesting because of the way she gives the money away, right? Mm-hmm. She's been doing this for many years now. Rather than having sort of her big foundation that she puts money into and then pays out, she tends to give directly to particular organizations. So, how would you sort of summarize her 2025, the causes she gave to, and how she kind of differs from these other big philanthropists and how she actually goes about it?
Yeah, so MacKenzie, Scott, gave around $7 billion away last year, which is, not only the most given away last year, but the most since we started tracking top givers about a decade ago. And so, just since 2019, when she had her divorce from Jeff Bezos and started, they split up their wealth, and, she started doing her giving on her own. Just since then, she's given away more than $26 billion in a very short amount of time. And, pretty miraculously that, this most recent years, $7 billion of giving boosted her from, number 5 on her list to number 3, behind only Bill and Melinda and Buffett. And like you said, she has a, sort of a very unique approach to her philanthropy, whereas, the Gates Foundation, which is, as I mentioned, where most of Gates and Buffett's giving has come from over the years, is like a company. It's like, staffed by, all these people who it's very like a very formal organization.
Yeah, enormous organization around the world, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas, MacKenzie, typically what she does is she writes an annual essay where she, announces, how much she gave away and what the organizations were. And, a lot of these, it's generally like smaller gifts to a large amount of organizations, usually with few or no strings attached, meaning that they can, use the money for the most part as they see fit, which is kind of unique. Like a lot of times if you're giving an organization a lot of money, you want to like sort of have a lot of say over how it's used.
Yeah, and there's a whole like grant making process, right, where they have to agree to use the funds for certain things, right? Yeah.
And then oftentimes, it's coming as a complete surprise to these organizations when a check shows up in the mail, one day, like as opposed to, more typically I would imagine, you're meeting with the Gates Foundation or whoever in advance to, go through a, very thorough vetting process up front. So yeah, she's kind of upended the way that we think about, traditional philanthropy over the last 7 or so years. And she's giving away her money at, a near unprecedented, if not, totally unprecedented rate. She's, disposed of at this point about 75% of the Amazon stock that she got from her ex-husband back in 2019. And, not all of that has made it to its final charitable recipients at this point, but she's moving very fast.
Right. So if she's sort of the biggest, in terms of overall numbers, what were some of the biggest, I guess, individual moves, pledges, donations that we saw in 2025 that stood out to you from the people on this list?
Yeah, there were some big ones. Maybe the biggest, probably the biggest was, the Dells, Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Computers, and his wife committed $6.25 or so billion to seed basically investment accounts for children under 10 as a part of this new Invest America initiative that President Trump recently announced, which will go into effect in I think on the 4th of July, actually, so very patriotic.
Yeah, and we had Kelly Phillips on the show earlier in the year to dive into those.
Yeah, so check out that video. But yeah, that effort got a big boost from the Dells. Another big gift was Nike co-founder Phil Knight and his wife Penny pledged $2 billion to the Oregon Health and Science University for cancer research. Actually at a a center there that's already named after the couple.
Right.
So they've, that's been one of their big, causes is that school over the years. And then another one was interesting to see like a bunch of these big name philanthropists come together to, address sort of a cause that we're seeing a lot of, as you might expect these days. Last year, Charles Koch, Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, all three of them in our top 25, and then two more major philanthropists and billionaires, Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, and then John Overdeck, who's a hedge fund billionaire. They all came together to pledge $1 billion to use AI to basically improve economic mobility. We saw a lot of big gifts over the last year, but those are the three that come to mind.
So when we're working on the world's billionaires list now, right? So looking at the wealthiest people in the world, but because this list is of the 25 most generous philanthropists in America, when you compare this top 25 most generous to the 25 wealthiest in the U.S., how does that stack up? Are there names that are conspicuously missing from the most generous, or, is it very similar? How does that sort of, how do you compare the two, I guess, right? Like what stands out there?
Yeah. So there are names in the top 25 most generous who are also, right up at the top of our billionaires list. I think of the top 10 richest people in the world, by our count. Several are, among the most generous givers, the top 25 most generous givers. A couple I mentioned earlier, Gates, who's actually dropped out of the top 10, but is, close.
Still among the wealthiest,
Buffett, Sergey Brin of Google is in the top 25. Jeff Bezos is in the top 25. Mark Zuckerberg is there as well. So there are, certainly, a bunch of those folks who are among the very richest, who are also among the most generous givers. Now, as a percentage of their net worth, some of those folks have given more than others. But then, like you said, there are, many among the world's richest who do not, crack this list, even though it would, require a very small portion of their fortunes to make the list. So Elon Musk is the obvious one. He's worth close to $800 billion, and he's given away, less than $1 billion. He doesn't make the list. The cutoff to make the top 25 was around $2 billion, so he's half the way there, or less.
Less than half.
Farther away. Same thing with Larry Ellison. Same thing with Sergey Brin's co-founder, Larry Page. Though in his case, it's a little more nuanced because, some of these folks do their giving through, more traditional foundations, which have to file.
Easy to track, right?
Yeah, tax returns with the IRS, and it's easier to track, albeit on a lag of a year or so sometimes. But then there are other vehicles that people can do their charitable giving through that have little or no disclosure requirements and are harder to track. And there's some indication that, Larry Page falls in that category. I don't know,
we don't
with
know
full
how
transparency how close he would be to making the list, but yeah. So those are three of the bigger names, three of the richest folks that you might expect to see on this list who have not made it thus far.
And another sort of interesting difference is that there's more women, right, among the top 25 givers. Both if you look sort of at individuals, but also couples, right? Because often, on the billionaires list, we only list the founder or sort of the individual who's made that fortune. But then we're looking at the philanthropy. Often both people in the relationship are really involved in the philanthropy, so we list them together, right? So what do you think is sort of is driving that, I guess, and how do you quantify that difference there?
Yeah. So like you said, on our billionaires list, and more specifically our Forbes 400, which is our list of the 400 richest Americans, we've seen over time, and it's getting a little better, but maybe not as quickly as some people would like to see. But there's a huge disparity in the number of men versus the number of women on the list. So of the 400 richest Americans, I think it's pretty low. It's like 16% of the list are women. And yeah, it's a little higher on the top givers list. So I think, excluding wives and ex-wives in the case of Melinda French Gates and Bill Gates, who were listing alongside their husbands. There are 6 of the top 25 top givers are women. So that's 25% of the list. So 10% or so higher than we saw in terms of wealth. And then, the other 19 or so, many of their women or many of their wives are very involved as well. So I guess, why is that the case? Most of those women, I guess all those women, the 6 that I referenced, are either the widows of, billionaires who have died, and they've, had been working with them on their philanthropy and have, continued it afterwards, or in the case of someone like MacKenzie Scott, are divorced from their husband who founded a company like Amazon. So I guess, unfortunately, the trend is still like the billionaires list. There aren't as many, I guess we would call them self-made women, as you would like to see on this givers list.
There's a lot of growing self-made women entrepreneurs and even billionaires, but they're not at a point where they're going to be
I guess
dozens of hundreds of billions of dollars like these people are.
I guess it'll take a long time for them to catch up with the Gateses and the Buffetts who've been doing this forever.
That's just a matter of time and age as well.
But then, so there's that. But then, like we talked about, these women are really making a mark on the philanthropic world and changing in a lot of ways how we think about how charitable giving has been done historically. With MacKenzie Scott, just the pure speed that she's introduced, and in sort of reporting for this list, we heard from a bunch of the folks that we talked to who work with these women about why that might be the case. Why are these women disproportionately philanthropic? And we heard a bunch of things, and one is maybe they've they're very these women we're talking about are very rich, but maybe relative to their very rich husbands have faced more inequity in their lives, so feel more drawn to other forms of inequity and want to address them. And then another interesting thing that we heard was, if you didn't create the business, then you're maybe not so attached to the fortune. And, it's less of a mental hurdle, I guess, to get over, to give it away.
Right, and try to fix some of those issues that they faced, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, if we talked about the top 25, right? Who didn't make the cut? Sort of who was really philanthropic, but not quite enough to actually get on the top 25 most generous?
Yeah. I would say there are 2 high-profile women that stand out to me who are right on the cusp of making it. The first being Alice Walton, who is one of the children or kids of Walmart founder Sam Walton. So the cutoff to make this year's list was about $2 billion. She was right below that.
$2 billion in giving, right?
In giving, yeah. So she's given away, we estimate, about $1.95 billion, or right below that $2 billion threshold. Focused in large part on art is one of her passions, and there's a huge museum in Bentonville, Arkansas, where Walmart is based, that has been one of the sort of passion projects of hers. And then there is a new Alice Walton School of Medicine opening up, and then actually it just welcomed its first class, I think, last year, also in Bentonville. So that's some of where her giving has gone. And then the other woman I alluded to is Miriam Adelson, who is the widow of the casino mogul Sheldon Adelson, who was a big supporter of Jewish and Israeli causes, and his widow, who is actually born in Israel, is similarly a big supporter of those causes and has continued their giving. So she's given about $1.8 billion. So right on the cusp.
So, those are the people who didn't quite make the cut last year. But if we're looking at sort of all of the causes that these top 25 givers gave to in 2025, we've talked a bit about health and arts and culture and a few different things. But what were sort of the broad areas that attracted the most or the most prominent donations in 2025?
Yeah. A lot of areas covered. A number that you mentioned: health, climate change, education, economic mobility. And we, alluded to a few sort of major gifts in those areas earlier. But in addition to those, maybe a few worth noting are on the education front. So Steve Ballmer, the former Microsoft CEO, and his wife pledged more than $1 billion to support a pre-K program in their home state of Washington. On the climate change front, Jeff Bezos and his wife, Lauren Sanchez Bezos, have this Bezos Earth Fund, which is basically committed to spend $10 billion in that area by 2030, and they're about a quarter of the way there as we sit here. And then, I guess on the health front, and specific to one particular disease, Sergey Brin, who's spent a ton of money on Parkinson's in particular. His late mother had it. He spent just under $500 million for going towards organizations working on research related to that disease over the past year. So yeah, there were a bunch of big gifts over the last year, but those were some of the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll keep tracking them obviously throughout 2026 and see sort of how things shake out at the end of this year. But Matt, as always, it's so great having you on, and we'll keep working on these lists together this year too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be seeing each other. But yeah, thank you for having me on.
You can find Matt's stories and the other stories we talked about in this episode in the show notes.